So we've now established the fact that characterizing the market is important, but it is an issue that has to be addressed with enough humility because it is a very slippery issue. Why is it that slippery? Because the very notion of market is somehow a blurry notion. And it's blurry because it carries several levels of definitions. Markets are inherently hierarchical. And very often, the entrepreneur, the innovator, is getting confused between the various levels of definition of the market. So this is what I'm going to talk about in the course of that presentation. The first level of definition of the market is the potential market. It is the set of potential buyers available in the marketplace who have a common need that your product or your service might satisfy. This is the big picture. This is the largest perspective possible that you may develop on your business. If you remember, this is what the Switch market slide covered. 247 drivers in San Francisco with a smartphone. That is the potential market that Switch was addressing. The problem is that the potential market never adopts entirely a product or service. In the best case, only a segment of the potential market will do. So the problem is that the potential market is on one side extremely appealing. Why? Because it drives big numbers. The market for cloud services will reach $900 billion by 2020. The market for the Internet of Things will reach $8.9 trillion by 2020. That does look like a promising picture. And entrepreneurs, innovators do like big numbers because they are ambitious. The problem is that the potential market tells you exactly nothing about the reality of your market. Let me take an example. This is about the story of an entrepreneur, David Friedberg, who in 2002-2003 got an idea on his way to work at Google. He realized that many businesses were impacted in their revenue just by the weather. The fact it rains, the fact it snows, has an impact on the revenue of many businesses. The big number is impressive. It turns out that 70% of the businesses in the US are directly impacted by the weather, which represent a $3.8 trillion business. That is indeed a big number. That is exactly what David Friedberg was heading to when he launched his company. His company was named the Weather Bill. And the Weather Bill initially was a website where any business owner could log on, describe the type of weather events they wanted to get covered with, and the website would cover a monthly fee for covering them against the fluctuation in revenue of any business weather events. It snows, it rains, again. So this is a website that David Friedberg launched. How much revenue did they generate out of that website? Exactly zero. Because it turned out that though it concerned 70% of the US businesses, it appealed apparently to 0%. So the first level is the potential market, the large perspective. Under the potential market, you have a second level that is the actual market. The actual market represents the set of consumers, of buyers who are today using a comparable product or service or a comparable value proposition. Users are already actually embarked in using something that looks like what you're thinking about building. This is the actual market. In the case of David Friedberg, the Weather Bill, there was no really actual market because the type of coverage that they were building didn't actually compare with really anything that already existed. The closest comparable you could think about could be insurance contract where you can be covered for extreme weather event, but nothing that will involve what happens when it rains, when it snows, or whatever. So in the case of David Friedberg, like in the case of a number of innovation, you might realize that you don't have an actual market because the space where you're entering turns out to be totally new. So potential market, actual market, that brings us to the third level, the addressable market. The addressable market is a subset of the potential market where you believe you can meet customers who, one, have a strong enough need that they might consider buying your product and your service, and two, you may physically talk to them. You can address them. The combination of these two criteria, they have a strong enough interest to consider buying, using your product, and you can physically talk to them, leads to an assessment of the addressable market. The addressable market is the cornerstone of the market assessment for a new venture because this is the best assessment of the potential of your venture. This is what every venture should identify. If we get back on the weather bill, the business from David Friedberg, realizing that no one was logging on the Weatherbill website, they started to conduct market investigation to understand within that potential. 70% of the US businesses are impacted by the weather. Who, in actuality, might be interested enough to buy the Weatherbill service? And conducting that investigation, they realized that the addressable market, far from the 70% of the US businesses, was mostly comprised of farmers, and these farmers were not looking for a website. They were looking for fully developed, fully written insurance contract. When David Friedberg realized that, they renamed the company into the Climate Corporation, and as soon as they started to actually apply this learning, the business took off. Suddenly, they had customers, they had paying customers who knew why they were buying what David Friedberg had to offer. Characterizing the addressable market is the first step for building a viable business. Potential market, actual market, addressable markets. We're now going to talk about the fourth level of market definition, the target market. The target market will be the subset of the addressable market that you as a company decide to focus on for the reason we've mentioned. The customers are easy to reach. You know they might be able to make a quick decision, so you might be able to derive out of them some early stage sales, confirm that the business could actually work, and it provides an actionable first step to managing further growth. That is what the target market is all about. This is the first tangible decision entrepreneurs, innovators are making in the course of building their business. So remember these four levels: potential, actual, addressable, and target. Most of the business plan I've read in my life actually develop the potential market. Again, because it drives big numbers. The only relevant level for a new venture is the addressable market and how you derive out of that addressable market an actionable choice for a target market to focus initially your resource on.